Hi, welcome back to my channel, and in today's video we're going to be doing a January reading wrap up. My January reading was very good and also subpar. So there were a couple of books that I read that were actually amazing, and there were others that just didn't hit the mark or didn't meet my expectations. So it kind of was not exactly a mixed bag, but it either hit the top or it was not memorable. I actually had 2 5-star books in January, and for me, getting a 5-star in 1 month is not a frequent occurrence, so to have 2 actually is just unheard of in a way. So I was definitely excited and happy about that. And so for my stats for this month, I read 6 books. There were 2 horrors, 2 literary fictions, 1 classic and 1 non-fiction. That's kind of like around about what I usually read, classic, lit fic, and I've been reading a lot of horror this year, so I think that's the genre that's gonna be popping up in a lot of places. So the first book that I read this year was Bunny by Mona Awad, and this book is a weird girl lit fic horror type of book, and it is a roller coaster ride. I honestly didn't know what was happening for about 90% of the novel. Even the ending I'm still very much confused with. There's a lot of directions that you could take the ending in. It's definitely a wild ride. I would say that this veers more into literary fiction, even though there are a lot of horror aspects, and because it is so gruesome and odd and crazy, it really does fall well into the weird girl fiction category. It's its own genre of pink academia and then like horror as well. So in this novel we're following Samantha Mackey, and she is doing her MFA at Warren University in, I believe it's creative writing, and in her program she has a workshop class with other students, and this other students is a clique of young women that refer to themselves and each other as bunnies. I'm not quite sure where that came from, but it kind of is linked to how Warren University and the area that they are in is inundated with bunnies. There are just apparently a lot of bunnies hopping around the campus and in the area in general. Samantha feels excluded by these women. They kind of are not exactly all similar, but they have this sort of like cult-ish way of dealing with each other and regarding each other and supporting each other, and they kind of look down upon Samantha and the type of writing that she has and the way she presents herself. She doesn't fit into their standards and she doesn't speak their language. Samantha all of a sudden is invited to an event with these women, and she decides to abandon her friend Ava in order to see what the group of women could want from her. And from that moment onwards, a whole bunch of crazy mishigas happens, and we get a deeper look into the inside of the group and the binding force that keeps them together and their shared goal. And there's a lot of themes about what it is to be a woman and being a woman in academia, and how women have needs, I guess you could say. There is a lot about the portrayal of womanhood, I guess you could say. A lot of focus on female dynamics and female relationships and the complete circle of female existence in a way. And we follow her as she devolves into madness, and a lot of madness gets exposed. Honestly, this book is covering a lot of themes, but I'm not quite sure I understand them all fully. My favorite thing about this book was the commentary, the use of the animals for one, that was very interesting, and the use of the magic and the spell kind of tying into witches, and also like oddly the use of the desire of the woman, the desire that they had for men, the reason why they wanted Samantha and Samantha's power, and how she's able to bring to life something with more substance that the bunnies themselves do not have the power to, because they are so shallow, and their shallowness is in how they speak to each other and how they regard each other. It doesn't feel real. And we kind of see that mask slipping, and I love that when the bunnies seem to show a sense of realness and truthfulness and honesty, it's almost at the hands of a man. In some ways, you could say that this book pedestalizes men, but I think the way that I choose to see it is more of just a complete view of womanhood. Honestly, if I was to go into the elements of this book, it would be insane, but I just loved how Samantha was able to create real humanness versus the bunnies being able to create pretty but ineffectual and useless dolls. Yeah, and other obvious elements is like including mania, what is real, what is fake, academia, and the pressures of academia, the classism, like the bunnies are wealthy and Samantha is not. So there's a lot of different themes that are touched upon in this novel. In the end, I gave it 3.5 stars, and I feel like now that I'm talking about it, I want to rate it higher, but like the reading experience was not the best for me. I don't know if I would read the next book. Honestly, now that I've spoken about it, I feel like I want to read it. Maybe I needed to sit with it more, to sit with the meaning and to appreciate it more. But yeah, I don't know. I think I might just read the sequel. But the writing was just very loose. It was easy to read for sure, but there were just moments where I didn't feel as connected to the story, so it took me out of it in a way. But I think I do resonate with my own personal meaning that I'm drawing from this novel, not necessarily what's being spoken on about online. I think this book is good for someone who has grappled with being an outsider, and someone who has grappled with isolation and loneliness and has sometimes had to turn to their imagination to fill voids, and someone who, even though you might look down upon the people who rejected you, still yearn to be accepted. If you are someone who enjoys pink academia, that'll be fun too. If you're someone who enjoys a wild ride and trying to derive meaning from something that is not as straightforward, I think this book might be a good recommendation for you. I like it more now that I've thought about it. The next book I have is Invisible Ink by Patrick Modiano, and this is a short novella, and it is set in France, in Paris, as well as I believe it is Switzerland. It definitely weaves through a couple of European countries. And this book is centered around a young man who takes on the job of being an assistant detective, and his first case that he is assigned is the disappearance of a woman, a wife. The information that he's given is incredibly sparse, and he's kind of tasked with going out into the Parisian streets and the different neighborhoods in Paris in order to figure out what happened to this woman and who she was, and up into a point of who even commissioned for her to be found. There's a lot of mystery around her. It kind of is a subject that begins to perplex him, and it begins to challenge him, and essentially it pushes the bounds of his own memory when he's dealing with this case. And it kind of spans multiple decades. He kind of works on the case, and then years later he picks it up a little bit, and then years later he picks it up a little bit. So it's something that's kind of followed him for a large portion of his life. I gave this book 3 stars, and that's primarily because even though the crux of this novel is following memory and how it fails us, and how there's certain moments that we have lived through that are lying hidden within us as if written in invisible ink. And I think that is a really interesting concept to look into, but I felt like the book itself was quite bland and kind of boring. I didn't really feel connected to it at any point. There were definitely some beautiful passages and moments in the novel, but I just didn't feel drawn to it or even interested in it that much. I think I liked how Modiano spoke about memory, his relation to memory. I feel like the dealing with memory and how it fails us and how it can get lost within us, and how in our youth we think that we will remember every single thing that there is to be remembered. But as we grow older, our memories can reveal themselves to us anew. I think that those themes were beautiful, but the medium which was used to explore those themes just didn't resonate as much for me. But the things that I disliked were just the distance that I felt from the story. I didn't feel connected to the characters. I didn't feel a sense of need or urgency or interest. Even the ending felt very flat for me. I guess you could say there was a reveal, but it didn't really even move the needle for me. I feel like what I got from the novel was more just interesting thoughts dispersed throughout it. I just didn't feel connected to the plot. This was definitely a quick read. I mean, it's only 150 something pages, so it's a quick read, but I just wish that we were given a plot which was worthy of the beautiful idea and concept of memories and invisible ink. A lot of the reason why I picked up this book in the first place was because Patrick Modiano is a Nobel Prize winning author, so I just wanted to see what his writing was like. And I'm not the most intelligent reader there is, so maybe I didn't enjoy it because I have to still grow in my understanding. For now, I can only speak on my experience as it stands. The next book I read in January was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and this is a gothic classic novel, and I honestly personally love gothic novels. I love the themes that they explore, having to do with haunting and isolation and doubting yourself and perception versus reality and exploring our greatest fears and the pain and suffering that comes along with that. So I definitely enjoyed those elements and aspects of this novel. This novel is actually a bit of a shorter one, about 250 pages. So if you really wanted to sit down and get to it, you definitely could get this done. Everything kind of wraps up in a really satisfying way. In this novel, we are introduced to a Dr. Montague, and he is a man of science with the occasional belief in the occult, and he wants to be able to document the occult and the ways that it shows up in a haunted house. So he has invited various people with documented supernatural experiences to this haunted house to see if he can scientifically prove the existence and occurrence of supernatural phenomena in our world. And as you can imagine, a lot of the people that were invited decline, but the two people that end up accepting are unmarried young women, and that's also another thing that is explored in this book, the role of an unmarried young woman in society and how she is treated, how she's looked at, and how she looks at herself. That's also something that was explored. But these women that are invited to the house along with the doctor and a man belonging to the family that owns the house, and they embark on their scientific observation of this haunted house, and we kind of view them slowly descending into madness, but also we view the dynamic that grows between them, and I found that to be very endearing. There's so much youthfulness in the characters, in their perception, in the way that they interacted with each other, so much fun and playfulness, which is contrasted by the haunting of the house and the scary nature of the home. We kind of learn about the history of the home, and we get a deeper dive into our main character, Eleanor, her perspective, and how the house shapes her perception and changes everyone's perception. And we kind of explore how the house doesn't want you to leave, and we're left questioning how much of our own choices are our own, or are they influenced by something outside of ourselves, and which we can't really understand. I found the pacing of the novel to be good, interesting, definitely moments of unease. It didn't feel like there were lulls in the book. I felt very engaged in the story, engaged in our characters especially, and again on the characters. They were written to perfection, like admiration, the jealousy, the degradation of the relationships, the isolation and the competition that exists between the women, and also withdrawal and the different characters that are brought in. I feel like Shirley Jackson has a talent of human traits where she writes characters that are from the jump extremely distinct and extremely believable. So I loved her character work in this, and it explored so many different human reactions in relationships. And the character that we follow, mainly Eleanor, she is a woman who has spent a lot of her life isolated, and she has come out of her first half of her life with her own independence now, and she kind of feels lost. And this invitation to Hell House couldn't come at a better time for her, because she is someone who isn't really living her life for herself, and she's seeking belonging. She also is very self-critical, but with all of that in her, she is constantly wondering if she's doing the right thing, and she's constantly worried about her position in the group and her position with other people and how she's viewed, and it kind of goes to the point of paranoia. So we really get to explore a lot of themes of madness, a descent into madness, and perception is just played with in such an amazing way in this novel. I really enjoyed that as well. So this was my first Shirley Jackson novel, and I definitely want to read a bunch of her others. I know she has a book called We Have Always Lived in the Castle and The Sundial, so those are definitely books that I want to pick up next. This was a really, really great read. I ended up giving this 4 stars. It just didn't reach a 5-star for me, but I still very much enjoyed it, and I felt like the ending was well done, and I liked that we had a bit of confusion over what was her choice versus what was imposed upon her. That was a lot that Nellie wanted, and almost in death you kind of laid to rest at that place. You remain in that place, so it's kind of like, even if you did pass on, your final place, your resting place would be your home. And I think that's what our main character had in mind, if that was even her choice. The next book that I read in January was Stoner by John Williams, and this is a classic novel, and in the plot of this book we are following William Stoner, and he is a son of a farmer who is born into a poor family in Missouri, and his father decides to send him to university in order to study agriculture, in order to better their family farming enterprise. And while he's at university, Stoner begins to fall in love with English literature, and he changes his major, and he works very, very hard because he didn't have a very concise education up until this point, but he works very hard and he studies English and he gets his degree, and he kind of decides to continue on in academia because that's what he enjoys, and he doesn't want to go back to the farm. So options are presented to him, options that he never even could have conceived of on his own without the guidance and support of others, and eventually he has to reveal to his family that he is staying at the university, and his parents kind of allow him to do that, and they get on with their life on the farm without him as he gets on with his life in academia. And we witness as he gets his PhD, and he's also around this time building friendships with other men in the college, and also he's faced with the World War. So we basically follow William as he finds love and builds a family and also grows his career, and we also reflect upon the life that he's lived because it's shown to us in its entirety, and the decisions he makes and what he chooses to fight for and what he chooses to let slide. I chose to get this book because I've heard so many amazing things about it online. It has been, I don't want to say hyped up, but it has been spoken about by so many people on Book Talk and on YouTube, and I personally just wanted to see what it was about. I gained a lot of intrigue from people that I trust recommending this book, and I also bought it because of this amazing NYRB edition that I have. It's such a beautiful cover. I know this book is also in print by Penguin, but I really wanted to get my hands on the NYRB. I think this book is a really good introduction to classics. If you're someone who's been wanting to get into classics, this is a really approachable book. The writing is beautiful and I enjoyed reading it. And I also recommend it for people who are grappling with the idea of a mundane life and questioning what the meaning of life can be in a world that seems to only want to knock you down. This is definitely like an underdog book, and I recommend it for anyone who at times has felt like an underdog, has felt like the world isn't on your side, and honestly anyone who's struggled with decisions and obstacles that are placed against you unfairly. I would recommend this book to you as well. We get to explore a lot of Stoner's relationships, the character relationships that exist in this novel. I found them to be, they felt very believable and they were interesting to read about, and they really framed his life and gave his life color. And the man that we are witnessing by the end of the book really is who he is due to the relationships that he's built and his human interaction over time, and how that has built him up and broken him down in equal measure. So the character work in this novel is amazing, and there are obviously multiple hallmarks in his life, like finding love, or so he thinks, and how that marriage shapes him as a man, becoming a father, and relinquishing that control and giving up in certain ways, and his academic career and the fights that he chooses and the corners that he's put into, and the question of integrity as well. So there are a bunch of amazing hallmark themes that get explored in this novel, and they're kind of set in by very important moments that happen in Stoner's life. There's this constant idea of like hard work. He is a character that is defined by the hard work that he chooses throughout his life till the very end. This book felt very personal, very beautiful, devastating, sad, but also just incredibly inspiring and almost like filled with the human spirit. A very human book. And just so many beautiful moments. I mean, John Williams' writing is just amazing. I think I'll just read one. Okay, so this is a beautiful quote that I have. They were both very shy, and they knew each other slowly, tentatively. They came close and drew apart. They touched and withdrew, neither wishing to oppose upon the other more than might be welcomed. Day by day, the layers of reserve that protected them dropped away, so that at last they were like many who are extraordinarily shy, each open to each other, unprotected, perfectly and unself-consciously at ease. So just amazingly beautiful writing, super relatable and human. And this edition, the NYRB, it's such amazing quality. Honestly, I tried to not get it too messed up so that it's still in a good condition, and these hold up quite well even after my initial read. Honestly, I think I loved every element of this book. I don't think there was anything that I disliked about it, and that is why I gave it 5 stars. I genuinely felt like a very complete novel, a very, very complete novel. And just how it was written was amazing. I loved the way that Stoner was portrayed, his passions, his hard work, his beliefs, his morals. Like, we really got a clear sense of who he is as a person. This was definitely one of the best reads that I had in January. Super memorable. The next book that I read in January was actually a reread for my book club, and that was A Little Life by Hanya Yanigihara. The story essentially follows 4 friends in New York, but it mostly follows one of these friends, Jude, who has had a troubled past, and we get to unravel his past and how that has shaped the person that he is today, and also understanding the way that he thinks. When we enter into Jude's perspective, we quickly learn that he is someone with a lot of insecurity, with a lot of self-doubt, with a lot of, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but a lot of apologizing for who he is. And he's very guarded as a person, and we get to witness his growth into adulthood, and we also unravel the horrific events that led to the person that he is in current. I would say that this book was amazingly well written. I think around the second time I got to enjoy how beautifully written it was. a lot more. Hanya Yanigihara is an amazing writer. She researches everything with insane precision. This book feels like a meticulous work, and there are moments where I felt like it was a bit long, but I still appreciated everything that we explored and everything we went through. And I feel like this book has consistent momentum. Like, there is always something happening. I mean, we basically follow these characters for over 3 decades of their life, close to 5 decades actually, including Jude's childhood, of course. There's always something happening, and growth and momentum. And I feel like, honestly, like, the number of characters that are mentioned in this book, like, there are so many different names of people, all types of names. If there is a name, it was probably used in this book, because, like, honestly, insane amount of people. Like, I want to see someone do a little life family tree, not a family tree, but like a character tree. I feel like this novel, I've never read anything like it, but there was another book that was published after this. It's called Tomorrow, and Tomorrow, and I read that previously, and I feel like those 2 books are probably the most 2 similar novels that I've read. But this book, honestly, in terms of its emotional depth and its writing and skill and length alone, it is definitely unique. There's really nothing like this book on so many levels, so there's nothing really I can compare it to. I did bump up my rating for this book from a 4-star to a 4.5 star, and I feel like that's because I appreciated her writing more, and I feel like I accepted the characters more, and I tried to be more open-minded. I think the first time I read it, I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen, so I was afraid, but because I knew the horror that this book holds, I was able to more intelligently and less emotionally engage with the text, and I found it to be insightful, and I also found it to be painful, yes, but like, I feel like it worked because it was so well thought out, and the information that we get ties in pretty well together. Like, everything, there is a bit of foreshadowing, and there's like constant repetitions of motifs and thought patterns and questions that are put forth that are constantly being repeated through the book. I don't know if we fully get the answer. This book is so comfortably sitting between massive plot and also just insight on life, and also character development. So it kind of straddles a lot of different categories at once. I don't know if I would recommend this book to anyone. Honestly, if you are someone who is able to deal with heavier topics, then I would recommend it on the basis of the epicness of it. This is an epic novel on the basis of the writing as well. It's beautiful writing. And if you're someone who maybe has a background in psychology, or is interested in human psychology in a way, and why humans are the way that they are, and outcomes and things like that, maybe you could also pick this up. I know that the author went about researching for this, especially in terms of like victims and how they behave in a way that was not ethical, and it is fiction, so I'm not sure how accurate Jude's persona and actions in life can actually be viewed. I still would recommend it if you're someone who's vaguely interested, but if you are not, and if you don't want to suffer unnecessarily, then definitely don't pick this one up. I think what I got from this book was the struggle of humanity, and the struggle to shed yourself and to reinvent yourself. The reminder that who you were is always a part of you, but also the beauty of humanity, and how we are capable of love, and how this love can surprise us, and it can exist almost seemingly hidden in plain sight. So there's beauty, there's pain, there's pleasure in this novel, but I feel like it's an exaggeration. It's extremely exaggerated. Whereas Stoner feels very real, this book has a human quality that is extremely dramatized, but I still enjoyed it. The last book that I read in January was Inferior by Angela Saini, and this is a non-fiction novel. It is basically exploring the different ways that women have been studied in science, and how that has been unfair to women, and how a lot of the conclusions drawn in science, along the lines of women's inferiority compared to men have been affected by the culture that we live in, and how they haven't been unbiased, and how this new age of scientific inquiry is trying to rectify the modern myths of differences biologically. And that could be from on the chromosome level or on the brain level. Like, men and women are biologically different, but that does not necessitate that women are inferior to men. And this book was published, I believe, in 2020, but honestly it's still incredibly relevant. And I honestly, if you're someone who has an enjoyment of science or biology, I would definitely recommend this, because it's such an interesting read. The amount of different studies that I've gone through, and the amount of research, and we actually go back quite far in time to Darwin's studies. So the idea of human evolution, and how even from his own point of view, women were viewed as accessories to male intelligence.